Hello students, welcome back to another session with me, Mr. Jama. In this session, we will be discussing about federalism. We will discuss about the definition of federalism, the features of federalism, and how federalism is practiced in India. First of all, let us discuss what federalism is. Federalism is a system of government in which power of the government is divided between the central authority and its constituent units. In simple words, it means a system of government where there are two levels, and the power of the government is divided between these two levels of government, and both these levels of government enjoy their power independently. So, this system is opposite, or it is a contrast to a unitary system of government. In a unitary system of government, there is only one level of government, and the subunits or the states are subordinate to the central government, or they are controlled by the central government. But in a federal system, there are two levels of government. That is a government in the center and a government in the state. And both these governments, that is the central government and the state government, exercise their power independently. So that is what federalism is. Let us discuss about some major features of federalism. Okay, yes, generally a federal system has two levels of government, but it is not compulsory that it should have two levels, because there are some there are some federations where there are more than two levels of government. So, the first feature is, yes, there are two or more levels of government. The second point is, each level has its own jurisdiction. The third point is, the jurisdiction of both the levels are specified by the Constitution. That means the area in which the central government can exercise its power and the area in which the state government can exercise its power is specified by the Constitution. It is clearly defined by the Constitution. So they cannot overutilize or interfere in each other's area of exercising the power. Then, the provisions of the Constitution cannot be, the main argument, the basic provisions of the Constitution cannot be changed by one level of the government. If some provisions are to be changed in the Constitution, then it has to be, it requires the consent or the approval of both the levels of the government. And if there is a conflict in interpreting the Constitution by the government, then there is a court which has the power to interpret the Constitution. That means either the central government or the state government cannot just interpret the Constitution according to its understanding. There is a court which is the guardian of the Constitution, and it has the power to interpret the Constitution. Then, as I have already mentioned, that both the levels of government exist independently and exercise its power independently. Now to run the government, revenue is necessary. Finance is necessary. That is why what happened? The Constitution has also specified the sources of revenue for each level of government. That means the Constitution has provided how to generate fund for the state government and for the central government separately. So federal system or a federation is created. The objective of setting up a federal system is to promote unity in the country, at the same time to accommodate regional diversity of the country. So these are some of the major features of a federal system. But now the balance of power between the center and the state varies from country to country. That means all the countries, in all the federal system, in all the federations, the division of power between the center and state is not same. In some countries, in some federations, the central government is more powerful. The central government exercises more power than the state government. Then in some federations, the states exercises more power than the center. So this difference in the balance of power between the center and the state depends on how a federation is formed. There are two ways in which federations are formed, usually. So the first way of forming a federation is known as coming together federation. Yes, this system of forming a federation is when independent states voluntarily agree to merge, to join together to form a bigger nation. Such system of federalism is known as coming together federalism. Some examples of coming together federalism are the United States of America, then Australia is one country, and another country is the Union of the Soviet Socialist Republic. Now in this system, independent states voluntarily come together under an agreement to form a bigger nation. So here in this system, the states are very powerful. Then another system of forming a federation is known as holding together federation. In this system, a federation is formed to maintain the unity of the country. In this system, the states are weaker than the central government. Example of holding together federalism is India. One very simple example of holding together federalism is India. Belgium is another example. So, federation is formed. A federation can be formed in two ways: holding together federalism and coming together federalism. Yeah. So, India is also a federal. India also has a federal structure of government. Why do we consider India as a federal system? Why? Because, as we have already discussed earlier about the major features of a federal system, India's government, the structure of India's government fulfills all the features which we have discussed earlier. That is why what is that? To name some, as we have already discussed, there are 2 or more levels of government. Each level of government exercises its own authority independently. Power of the government is specified by the constitution. So all these things, all these features are present in the Indian system of government. Besides this, as we have already the main thing is, yes, the power of the government has been divided very clearly by the constitution. The legislative power of the government has been divided into 3 categories in India. Yes, the legislative power of the government has been classified, but has been clearly divided into 3 categories. One is the union list. The union list, the state list, and the concurrent list. The union list originally has 97 subjects. The state list originally has 66 subjects, and the concurrent list has 47 subjects. What are these? These are the areas in which the government is assigned to exercise its power of making laws. Or, yes, these are the areas in which a government, a particular level of government, has the power to legislate or to make laws. So, the first level, the first category is the union list. That is the list in which the subjects are given for the central government. Some examples in which the central government has the power to make law: defense, finance, currency, external affairs. These are some areas in which only the central government can make law. Then we have the state list, which includes the subjects in which only the state government has the power to make law. So there are 66 subjects given in the state list. One example is police, that is the police department. The power to make laws on the police department is given to the state government to maintain law and order. Then marriage, irrigation. These are some areas in which only the state government has the power to make law. Then, the third category is the concurrent list, which includes subjects on which both the central government and the state government can make law. Yes, so the concurrent list includes those subjects where both state government and central government can make law. Example is education. So, but since both the central government and the state government has been given the right to make law on the subjects given in the concurrent list, there might come a situation where there will be a conflict between the 2 levels of government. If both the central government and the state government wants to make law on a particular subject at the same time, then what will happen? If such cases arises, then the central government has priority over the state government. That means that if such situation occurs, then the central government will get the first choice or first opportunity to make law. So, this is how the power of the government to legislate, the legislative power of the government has been classified or divided into 3 levels. That was when the constitution was adopted. Now, what about problems, or what about areas which emerged after framing the Constitution? Now, for example, at the time of framing the Constitution, there was no such thing like cyber crime. So who will make law on subjects which were not existing at the time of framing the law? So to provide area for making laws on such subjects which did not exist before, the power to make laws on those subjects which are not included in this tree list is given to the central government in the form of residuary power of the central government has power to make laws on those subjects which does not come under these three categories. So this is how India satisfies the conditions of a federal system. Now let us discuss about how federalism is practiced in India. Yes, the first manner in which federalism is practiced is creation of linguistic states. At the time of independence, or even before independence, the leaders of the country had already planned to create states on the basis of language spoken by the people. But unfortunately, after independence, India was partitioned on the basis of religion. That is why the leaders of the country were apprehensive. They were reluctant to create linguistic states because they feared that if linguistic states were created, it might lead to disintegration of the country. But demand for linguistic states began to emerge after independence. That is why the leaders were compelled to create states on the basis of language. So, Indian states were created on the basis of language. But not all the states were created on the basis of language, because some states were created on the basis of culture. Take the example of the state of Nagaland. The people of Nagaland don't speak a common language, but the state of Nagaland has been created on the basis of a common culture. But many of the Indian states, take for example, in Maharashtra, Marathi is the language, Gujarati, Bihari. So, but most of the states have been created on the basis of language. That is how federal structures were established on the basis of language. Then, another way in which federalism is practiced in the country is the language policy, through language policy. It is estimated that in India, about 1,500 languages are spoken. And among this, Hindi has been recognized as the most widely spoken language. So, the government adopted a policy to adopt Hindi as the official language of the country. But in reality, Hindi is the first language only to 40% of the population. And so, Hindi is not a first language for the remaining 60% of the population. That is why, in order to avoid complications, besides Hindi, many other languages has also been recognized as important language, and they have been declared or adopted as scheduled language. So, along with Hindi, there are 22 languages which has been recognized as as scheduled language of the country. These languages can be used as an option in place of Hindi and English in any examination, and the government recognizes all these languages as major language of the country. Not only that, every state is entitled to have its own state language. So this step has been taken by the government. This language policy has been adopted by the government to ensure equal importance to the major languages spoken in different parts of the country. And that is how federalism is realized through the language policy that India adopts. Unlike Sri Lanka, as we have discussed in the previous class, in which we have seen that Sinhala was declared as the national language. It was declared as the official language, and it was forcefully imposed on the Tamils. So, in order to avoid such things, such policy, such situation, the country has recognized 22 languages, including Hindi, as scheduled language. The next topic is about center and state relation. I have already mentioned that there are two ways in which a federal system is formed. So I have already mentioned that India has the second way of coming into existence, that is the holding together federation. And in the holding together federation, the center is usually more powerful. The center exercises more power than the state. Now that is why a study of the relation between the state government and the central government is very important. In the history of India, in the history of independent India, we have learned that after independence, elections were held, and it was the Indian National Congress which came to power, which won the election. And for many years, the Indian National Congress was in power, both in the state and the center. So, since the political party, since a single political party ruled both in the center and the state, there was no conflict in the relation between the center and the state. But since the Congress was the most powerful political party, the government in the center at times misused its power when non-Congress governments were established in the states. And the central government many a times used its influence to bring down these non-Congress governments in the states. But lately, or in the 1990s, after the 1990s, this nature of relation between the center. Okay, so since the central government uses its authority to bring down non-Congress governments, the relation between the central government and the governments in the states which were not formed by the Congress party did not have a good relation. But the nature of relation between the center and the state has changed considerably after the 1990s. Why? Because, yes, the Congress, the Indian National Congress, lost its dominance, and now many other regional political parties began to emerge, and they began to win elections. So, both in the center and the state, coalition governments were formed. What is a coalition government? A coalition government is a government formed by two or more political parties. When two or more political parties come together to form the government, such a government is known as a coalition government. So, yes, after the 1990s, in many states and in the center, coalition governments were established. And so these constituent members, that is the constituent parties, the other political parties who were members of the coalition, they began to play a very important role. They began to exercise huge power. That is why the smaller political parties began to gain authority. Because of this, now the central government cannot just impose its will or impose its authority on the state governments. That is the reason now the relation between state government and central government has improved considerably after the establishment of coalition governments. So these are some of the major features of Indian federalism. As we all know, that India is the second largest country in the world in matters of population. For a country which has such a huge population, just having two levels of government is not sufficient. That is why in India, a third level of government has been established. In a country like India, which has a very huge population, we all know that India has the second largest population in the world. The population of the state of Uttar Pradesh is more than the population of Russia. So for a country like India, having just two levels of government is not sufficient. Why? Because in these states, in these big states, and not only that, yes, in these big states, there are diverse culture and diverse features. So, in India, a third level of government has been established, which is known as the local government. The Indian leaders were aware of this problem, and it has been in the minds of the leaders to establish a third level known as local government. And in many states, experimentally, local governments were established in the form of panchayats. But local governments became a constitutional institution only after the government made an amendment in the constitution, and the 73rd and the 74th amendment was passed in 1992. The 73rd amendment, known as the Panchayati Raj Bill, and the 74th amendment, known as the Nagar Palika Bill were passed in 1992, giving constitutional position to local governments. So, according to this provision, regular elections were to be held for the local government. Then seats were to be reserved for the scheduled tribe, the scheduled caste, and the backward classes. 33% of seats were to be reserved for women. So these were some, then the state government has to share some of its power to the local governments. So these were some of the provisions made by the Constitution after the 73rd and 74th amendments were made, which gave more authority to local governments and which gave constitutional authority to local governments. So local governments were to be set up both in the rural areas and the urban areas. The nature of local government is different for rural areas and the urban areas. In the rural areas, local government is organized in 3 levels. At the district level, we have the Zila Parishad. Then we have the Blok Samiti or Mandal Samiti. Then at the lowest level, we have the Panchayat. So, each village has a Panchayat. The members of the Panchayat are elected by the elders of the village. Every individual who has reached the age of 18 years has the right to elect the members of the Panchayat. And this body of elders are known as the Gram Sabha. So it is the Gram Sabha which elects the members of the Panchayat. And the members of the Panchayat is led by a head known as the Sarpanch. Then, few villages together, panchayats of few villages together forms the Mandal Samiti or the Blok Samiti. Here the members of the Blok Samiti are elected by the members of the panchayats of those villages which are constituent of that block. And the the Blok Samiti is led or is headed the political head of the Blok Samiti is known as the chairperson. Then at the district level, all the members of the Mandal Samiti will elect the members of the Zila Parishad. Then the Zila Parishad includes, the members of the Zila Parishad includes those MLAs and MPs from that particular district. Then it will include some of the administrative officers, then some members of the district organizations. All these members, they are members of the Zila Parishad, and they elect the head of the Zila Parishad, who is also known as the chairperson. The Zila Parishad is the highest level of local government in the rural areas. For the urban areas, There are two categories of local government. For smaller towns, we have municipalities. For smaller towns, we have municipalities whose members are elected from different wards. The whole town is divided into different wards, and from each ward, candidates are elected and they become the members of the municipalities. Then, from among the elected members, a chairperson is elected to lead the members of the, to run the members of the, to run the municipality. In the same way, in metropolitan cities, in big cities, we have municipal corporations. The election of the members are same again. The whole city is divided into different wards. Members are elected from each ward. And the political head of the municipal corporation is known as the mayor. So, establishment of local governments has helped in enabling people to participate in the political activity, in democratic activity. This has helped in achieving the people. It is the local people to settle their own problems, to solve their own problems. In spite of its many contributions, there are still many more hurdles to be overcome because there are many shortcomings in running the local governments. For example, shortage of funds. So, in spite of its many achievements, there are still many steps to be taken to make local governments a success. So in this session, we have discussed about the definition of federalism, features of federalism, how India can be considered as a federal system. We have discussed about how federalism is practiced in India. While practicing about how federalism is practiced in India, we have discussed about the creation of linguistic states, the language policy adopted by the government. We have discussed about the relation between the center and the state government. And finally, we have discussed about the third level of government, that is local government in the country. If you have any problems, feel free to question in my number or through WhatsApp. Thank you for joining this session. Stay safe. Take care.